Hi, I'm Pastor Longman from Holy Trinity Lutheran Church in Rogers, Arkansas. This has been a very strange time for all of us. Our normal has been turned upside down. We're isolated at home, worshiping through online video presentations, and we're missing our friends and the social interaction and community that's so important to us. I have been watching Governor Hutchinson's daily briefings regularly, and I was especially excited for Monday's briefing because he promised to make an announcement about loosening restrictions on places of worship. And sure enough, he provided guidelines for the initial phase of reopening. I met with the Board of Elders on Tuesday evening, and we have put together a plan for this Phase 1 reopening. Now, the point of the video is to share the information about how Holy Trinity will ease back into in-person worship. But I need to preface it by sharing a quote from one of our elders. He said, "Pastor, people need to understand that this is a long way from normal." And he's right. This is a first step, and it is a tentative step. It's one that we and other churches will cautiously take while we carefully watch the numbers to see if there's a resurgence of the virus. It is still out there, and it's still dangerous, and we all need to be mindful of that. So I want to begin by sharing some general guidance provided by the federal government. And these are really just common sense actions that you can take to minimize the risk of becoming infected. First, all of us need to continue to wash our hands with soap and water or use hand sanitizer, and especially so after touching frequently used items or surfaces. This is just good hygiene, and it has a huge impact on your health. Second, avoid touching your face. The most common means of transmission of this thing is that someone comes in contact with the virus on a surface, and they're infected, and then they touch their mouth or their nose or their eyes. One of the reasons that we're encouraged to wear a mask is because it helps to serve as a reminder not to touch your face. If you have to sneeze, and I know there's a lot of pollen out there right now, so we're all sneezing more than usual, but sneeze into a tissue or into the inside of your elbow. It helps to contain the little droplets that could also carry the virus. We should all be disinfecting frequently used items and surfaces as much as possible. I've got a container of disinfecting wipes in my truck, and I'm all the time wiping stuff down with them. As I mentioned earlier, we're encouraged to use face coverings in public. And if you don't have a mask, there are bunches of tutorials online that you can find with easy, creative ways to fashion them. And I know we've got a few folks in the congregation who are making them. We can help you find one if you need one. Also, when you're out in public, remember to maximize physical distance from other people. Keep that buffer between you and them to minimize the chance of being infected. The general rule of thumb is 6 feet, and lots of places have been marking that on the floor so that you have a visual reference. 2 more important things. If you feel sick, stay home. And that means anything from fever to sore throat to coughing, sneezing, diarrhea, whatever. If you're not well, don't take the risk of infecting someone else. Stay put, rest, get plenty of fluids. You know the drill. And finally, if you're among the group of vulnerable individuals, and that means if you're older or if you have other health issues that could compromise your immunity, then you need to continue to shelter in place. Don't go out in public. Don't expose yourself to that risk. Stay put, stay safe, stay healthy. Now, with all of that said, let me share Holy Trinity's plan for Phase 1 reopening. Remember, this is just Phase 1. It is us dipping a toe in the pool. As I mentioned, it is far from normal, as you'll hear in a moment. But all of these restrictions and adjustments are intended to help keep all of us safe. So far, to my knowledge, nobody in our congregation has contracted COVID-19. And we'd love for it to stay that way. And honestly, the very last thing that we want is for Holy Trinity to be the focus of a news story about the latest hot spot in Northwest Arkansas. Please understand why we're doing it this way, and be patient as we slowly work our way back to some kind of normal. All of these precautions are drawn from the best advice we could find from medical professionals, and they have been carefully considered by our Board of Elders. I'm happy to announce that Holy Trinity will begin limited worship on Sunday, May 17th at our usual worship times of 8 a.m. and 10:45 a.m. But there's a key phrase here, limited worship. We will be restricting the number of people who can participate in order to allow for adequate social distancing. As I said, this is a long way from normal. It's just a first step, and your patience and your cooperation are very much appreciated. Now, even though we're beginning to ease back into in-person worship, we will continue to have an online presence. It'll look a little different, of course, because we'll switch to live streaming the services rather than using a pre-recording. But the services will still be available online, and you are strongly encouraged to continue to avail yourself of online worship for now. We don't want to rush back together and create a dangerous situation. Besides, I know more than a few of you are finding that couch pretty comfortable, and you're getting a lot out of worship with a cup of coffee in your hand. And that's okay. Take advantage of the online services. It is definitely less risky. That said, if you've just got to worship in person, I get it. And here's how it'll work. First, you will need to make a reservation for live worship by calling the church office. As I mentioned, space will be limited in each service to allow for adequate distancing, and I'll share a little bit more about how that will work in a minute. Be prepared to attend worship at a time other than your usual time. If the early service is your favorite and it fills up, maybe sign up to come to the late service. And if we find that both services are filling, we are considering adding additional services to give you more options. Remember, if you've had a recent fever, if you're experiencing symptoms of any kind, or if you have been exposed to someone with COVID-19, please stay home. Come to online worship. Protect yourself and protect your brothers and sisters in Christ. But for those of you who will come for worship, you must wear a mask, and you must keep it on throughout the service. I've seen some statistics that indicate that the risk of getting the disease if everyone is wearing a mask is dramatically reduced. So it's just smart. Plus, this is one of the recommendations of the Arkansas Department of Health. And while I want to welcome everyone to worship, we're serious about this right now. If you don't have a mask, you will not be able to attend worship. Period. Be aware that we're not yet ready to resume in-person Sunday school or adult Bible study during the 9:30 hour. The state has cautioned against it, and we agree that the risk of those kind of gatherings is too high. We'll continue to offer online options for Bible study, but note that my adult Bible study via Zoom will be shifting to a different day and time so that I can help with sanitizing the building between services. We'll share more details on that later. So, what will worship look like? I want to share some of the important changes that we're putting in place so that you know what to expect when you come for worship. Keep in mind, this is not an exhaustive list. There are other things that we are doing to protect your health as well, but this will give you a pretty good idea of what it will look like. First, some pews will be blocked to allow for social distancing. When you come into the sanctuary, you'll find that we're only using every third pew, and we'll be marking the pews with tape to give you a sense of what that 6-foot distance looks like. Family groups are welcome to sit together. You've been isolated at home together anyway, so we figure you've got each other's cooties. But we do ask that you keep at least 6 feet between family groups. The tape on the pews will help with that, and honestly, further is better. As I mentioned, each worshiper must have a mask and wear it throughout the service. No ifs, no ands, no buts. Masks are required. As the pastor, I get a pass, according to the recommendations, but only because I will be up front, much further away from the congregation. In fact, I'll be in the chancel area, close to the altar, throughout the service. Otherwise, I'll have a mask on too. Our service will be shorter than usual. We want to minimize our shared time inside in order to reduce the risk of sharing germs. So don't be surprised that we don't do all the things that we usually do in worship. The crucial stuff will be there. Confession and absolution, the readings, the sermon, the creed, and more. We will receive all of the gifts that God has for us in worship, I promise. One omission that I hate to have to announce is that there will be no congregational singing at this point. Now that hurts, because Lutherans are a singing bunch, and so much of our worship revolves around music. But there's quite a bit of research that indicates that singing, and specifically the greater amount of air that gets expelled in the process, creates a much higher risk of infectious aerosols floating around in the air. You may have heard the report of a choir that met for rehearsal early in the pandemic and became a so-called super spreader event. Over 60% of the choir members contracted COVID-19 and 2 members died. And that was a choir that was being very intentional about social distancing. So we're going to err on the side of caution here and restrict congregational singing during this initial phase of reopening. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be any music, but we'll handle it more like anthems and less like congregational hymn sings. Now, I know we're a pretty social bunch, but common sense precludes the coffee hour in the narthex at this time. I'm going to encourage you to run out for coffee after church at 7 Brew or Starbucks. There'll be a time for our special church blend, but not quite yet. Also, out of an abundance of caution, we will not be offering Holy Communion in the worship setting during this initial phase. Now, that's not to say you can't receive the sacrament. We'll continue the process that we've been using, where you simply call and make an appointment with me, and we'll come together for Holy Communion. But for now, we won't be doing it in worship, largely because it presents several challenges about how to do it safely. You've heard me say this before, and I'll say it again. Holy Communion doesn't wear off or get stale. You still have the gifts that God gave you from the last time you received it, and you'll be okay to wait a little while until it's safe. Finally, we will be sanitizing the sanctuary and the narthex between worship services, wiping all the surfaces down with disinfecting wipes and opening doors to allow air to flow through and to dissipate anything that may be in the building. We will do everything in our power to reduce the risk to our members. Now that's a lot of information, I know. We'll post this video on Facebook and on our website so that you can go back and review it. And we'll have written guidelines posted as well. We should be ready to begin accepting reservations for the May 17th worship by Monday, May 11th. And I hope that it's clear why we've chosen to approach it this way and that you agree with the approach. But if you have concerns, reservations, or recommendations, please share them. You can reach out to me directly or talk to any of our elders. We'll be happy to chat with you about the how and the why. Please remember, God has not abandoned you, and He's not punishing you. But you can be sure that He is right in the middle of all of this. He knows your frustrations. He understands your loneliness. He weeps for those who have been affected by this pandemic, whether that's through the loss of a loved one or enduring the actual disease or losing work hours or even becoming unemployed. He knows how much you want to get back to a normal routine. But He's also bringing good things out of this. He's helping to reorient our priorities. He's leading folks to love and to care for others. He's building up the community within the church, even as we're separated. He's using all of those gifted doctors and nurses and healthcare workers to tend to the sick. And He's providing for all of your needs too. Trust in Him. Find your comfort in Him. And know that God is walking with you through all of this. Thank you for your encouragement and your support. What a blessing it is that we have one another during these crazy times. I'll see you in church, whether that's on a screen somewhere or whether it's in the sanctuary. God bless you all.